Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Gittin. This is our 5th class, and today we are going to be reviewing Daf 29 through 36. Okay, we are beginning with the Mishnah on the top of Daf 29. The Mishnah tells us that if a person is bringing the get from within Eretz Yisrael, meaning from within Israel to another place in Israel, and then that agent gets sick. So then the original agent, can appoint a new agent because, again, he doesn't have to say, I saw it being written, right? Befanai nichtav, befanai nichtam. He doesn't need to say that because he's coming from within Israel. So he can appoint another agent. If the husband asks the agent to also retrieve something from the wife, so then he cannot appoint a new agent because now it becomes a little bit more complicated. So the Gemara explains that he can only appoint another agent if he gets sick, but not for any other reason. Right? Meaning basically for the fact that he can't make it, so then he can appoint another agent. A Braita teaches us that if the husband said, take this get to my wife, right? Holech, right? Take this to my wife. So then he can appoint another agent, even if he's not sick. But if he says, you need to take this get, so then he can't appoint another agent no matter what. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, either way, you can't appoint a new agent, meaning if the husband trusted you, then you need to go. So this is different than our Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah seems to say something else. So the question is, how do we resolve the difference? So our Mishnah is different because the person got sick and therefore he can appoint another agent, right? So we see that there's this idea of being sick that makes a difference. If the husband tells, let's say, a number of people to write and deliver a get, then they must write and deliver a get, right? They can't appoint anybody else. And this is because the husband would be embarrassed that he couldn't write it himself. So there were certain people who were appointed, and that's it. You can't have anybody else, right? In our case, the husband wouldn't care because here he just appointed someone to take the get, not to necessarily write it. Therefore, he can appoint another agent, another shaliach. Or maybe the difference is that in this case, it's only these instructions. And again, right, the instruction was to write and deliver the get. Therefore, that can't be transferred. If I asked you to do it, then you need to do it. But in our Mishnah's case, we basically have a tangible object. He gave the person the get and he said, give this to my wife. So here, maybe because there's a tangible object, we say that could be transferred to another agent. Okay, now we have a machloket if the agent can appoint someone else to write a gift document, right? So we're always going to go back and forth in our Gemara comparing writing a get to writing something else. So here we have a document that says, I want to give a gift to somebody else. So the question is it like a get, meaning you're writing a document that's going to do something? So is it like the get that you can appoint the agent, or is it that you cannot appoint a second person? So that's the machloket in the Gemara. Let's say, right, so we were talking about an agent appointing another agent. So from here, the Gemara talks about somebody who borrowed something. Can they lend it out to somebody else, right? Meaning, like, if I lend you something, I don't necessarily want you to give it to anybody else. And we have a very common practice that we have, right? If let's say someone is renting a person's apartment, right? Can they rent it to somebody else, right? What we would call subletting, right? And the Gemara actually discusses, do you have the ability to do this or not? In the Mishnah's case, right, maybe the get would be invalidated, right? Because again, we sent it from one agent to another, right? Because again, the husband, we're going to the second case now in the Mishnah, where the husband stipulated that he wants something to be delivered to his wife in a particular way. So maybe that has to be given in a very particular way. Okay. If, again, now there's a machluket, if the husband stipulated that she should return an object to him, right, via this agent, right, and then then the agent can give the get, and let's say she does the opposite. Let's say she gets the get first, and then she gives the object. So there's a machluket in the Gemara if this is valid or not, right? Do we have to do everything in the exact order that the husband wanted or not, right? If she did it in the right order, but let's say she gave it to a second agent, right? So let's say agent number one gets the item, but she gives her the get, but she gives the item to agent number two. So everyone agrees that that does work. If it worked in the right order, it doesn't matter if she gives it to agent number one or agent number two. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 29. If an agent is bringing a get from outside of Israel, right? So we discussed in the beginning of this Daf, if the agent is bringing the get from within Israel. Now we have an agent bringing a get from outside of Israel. If you remember, we said that if you bring from outside of Israel, you need to say that you saw it being written and you saw it being signed, right? Befanai nichtav, befanai nichtam. So now what do? If let's say this agent gets sick, so the Mishnah teaches us that he can appoint another agent in court, meaning he has to go to court. The court validates the document and then hands it over to another agent, right? And he, again, agent number one, it tells the court, I saw it being written. And then the second agent says that he was sent by the court, right? This is called a shaliach beitin. He's the agent of the court, as opposed to the agent of the husband. And this is valid. So now the Gemara says, right, well, okay, now we have a second agent. Can the second agent appoint a third agent, right? Let's say this guy gets sick. I don't know, everyone's getting sick, but right, can they appoint another person? And the Gemara says yes, as long as it's done in court, right? Again, if agent number two now goes to court and does the same thing, so then it works. If the agent is from Israel, again, remember we said, right, the person can appoint a second, and here the Gemara teaches also even a third outside of court, right? Again, if the original agent is from within Israel. But interestingly, the Gemara teaches us that if agent number one dies, then all the agents are invalid, right? Because again, they're all getting their shlichut, right? Their agency through this agent number one. And if agent number one is no longer around, we now have a problem. Another opinion in the Gemara is that it's really about the husband, right? Again, agent number one was only an agent of the husband. So as long as the husband is alive, all the agents are fine. If the husband dies, so now everything is invalid because again, there's no shlichut, there's no agency anymore. Okay, next case, a husband sent an agent to give the get to his wife, and then he was told to give it, again, the agent was told, he's like, I don't know who your wife is. So the husband tells him, oh, give it to Abba Barman Yumi, and he'll give it to my wife, right? He knows who my wife is. And then the agent goes and he can't find this person. So he wanted to give it to the court. And then they would give it to the wife. So the Gemara says that he can do this, right? He has the ability to appoint the court as his agents, but it does work. Let's say the husband told the agent to deliver the get in 30 days. And then during the 30 days, the agent gets sick again, or couldn't deliver it, and he can't deliver it after, right, within those 30 days. So now, again, he goes to court, and then they can appoint another agent, right? So you see how when things get complicated, they have to go to the court, and then the court appoints the next agent. The Gemara says we don't have to be concerned that he just decided not to give it to her. We know that if the agent needs to go, then the agent will go and deliver the get. Okay, daf number 30. We said that the court can appoint another agent. And here the Gemara tells us that even the original agent doesn't have to be present when the second agent is appointed, right? Basically what happens is the agency gets transferred to the court, and the court can then subsequently appoint the next agent. The Gemara discusses two different cases where the husband couldn't fulfill his stipulation and it was beyond his control. We're going to see this case a few times in this Masechet, but basically, right, a husband says, right, give the get to my wife if I don't come back in 30 days, and the husband is, on the other side of the river in 30 days, but he misses the last ferry, and he's like screaming across the river, I'm here, don't give her the get. The Gemara says, no. If you were really serious, you would have taken the second to last ferry. You shouldn't have waited for the last ferry. If you don't come, right, there's a line in the Gemara which is ein ones begittin, which basically means there's no such thing as it was out of your control. Meaning, obviously, there are things that are out of your control, but this is very serious, and you have to take things seriously. And if you can't make it back, so then the get goes to your wife in 30 days, which is a very interesting concept, especially because the person, again, it's out of their control. Again, the Gemara talks about these uncontrollable circumstances, and we say, you should have been aware of what could have happened, and the woman gets her get. I think that really this is a way to protect the woman. I think this is a way to make sure that the woman gets divorced and the husband can't play games in terms of like, I tried, I missed my flight, there was traffic, yes, no. I really think that this is a way to protect the woman, to make sure that she gets the get that she's been waiting for. But that's my personal opinion. We will see these another case like this in a little bit. Okay, let's go to the next Mishnah on Daf 30. If a person lent money to a Kohen, to the priest, or to the Levi, or to a poor person, and there was a deal. What's the deal? That the person will separate from his crop for them, right? Again, the lender lends money to a Kohen. The Kohen has to pay back the lender. Now, what we have to remember that the lender, when the lender is a farmer, when he harvests his crops, he needs to give part of the crops, right, truma, to the Kohen. And Levi, he has to give maser, right? There are different things he has to give. So instead of giving the truma to the Kohen, he's just going to keep the truma as payment for the loan that the Kohen took from him, right? So this is a way for the Kohen to pay back the farmer. Okay, so now the lender can keep the crops as payments, and the Gemara says, the Mishnah says that as long as he's harvesting these crops, the lender can assume that the Kohen or the Levi or the poor person is alive, and therefore he can keep the produce for as long as he thinks that they're alive. If, however, they died, right, let's say he finds out that they died, he needs to ask the heirs permission to continue the deal. Again, if there's a loan, that debt is passed down to the children have to make a new deal with the lender, right? If he lent them money through the court, so then he doesn't have to ask permission from the heirs, he can continue taking the money. So now the Gemara tries to understand what we're talking about here. So the question is, the produce, right? What happens? The produce is harvested. In theory, right, the lender is supposed to give the truma to the Kohen, and then the Kohen, it gives the produce back to the lender. So now the Gemara asks, wait a minute, the borrower needs to acquire it before the lender can take it, right? How does he, right? How can it be that the lender just keeps it? The Kohen never owned it in order to give it back to him. So the Gemara explains that the lender always gives this person, right? He has his Kohen that he always gives, and therefore it's assumed that he would give it to him. Therefore, he doesn't have to give it to him. It already becomes his. Another option is that somebody else acquires it for him and then he takes it back. Or the third option is there's a decree that as soon as he separates it, it becomes the Kohen's, even though the Kohen is not there, and then he can acquire it back. But either way, he can use that as payment for the loan. Okay. So now the Gemara explains that the produce has the cheapest market value, right? Again, how are we going to determine its value? It's the cheapest market value, and it's not considered interest, right? Because there's different values, we would be concerned with interest. As we know, you're not allowed to charge interest. So the Gemara says we can even have a pre-arranged price, and it would not be considered interest. The lender cannot cancel the deal, but the Kohen can, right? Meaning the Kohen can say, you know what, never mind, I'll pay you every month. We'll set up a payment plan, but the lender cannot change the agreement. If the owner, let's say, despairs about his crop, so that he can't keep the truma as payment, even if the crop gets better, right? Depending on what the crop looks like that year. If it was done in court, we said that the lender can continue to collect from the produce even after the person dies. And if a poor person, now again, right, the farmer has to leave gifts for the poor. So if the poor person, let's say, became rich, he doesn't actually have to pay the loan back because he took it out thinking that whatever produce he owes the lender, he'll just keep it. Now he's rich, so he can't collect that produce anymore. So it's as if the loan gets canceled out. If the heirs inherit the father's property, so then they also inherit the debt. Remember I said the debt is inherited to the children, but that's only if they inherit the property. Therefore, the lender can keep taking the trumot till they pay off the debt, no matter how large the field is that the children inherited. Okay, if a person pays for the maser in his possession to the Levi, so then he can eat it, right? He doesn't need to be concerned that maybe the Levi tricked him and changed its status, right? Again, the Levi gets the maser. So for the same idea, there could be a kind of an agreement between the farmer and the Levi that he'll buy back the right to this maser. But it has to be specified. Okay, Daf 31, we have a new Mishnah. The Mishnah says that a person leaves the produce set aside in his house to be for Trumot and Masrot, for anything that he eats, let's say, outside of the house, right? Let's say someone says, I'm going on a trip, I'm going to buy fruit from the market. I'm not going to be able to separate Trumot and Masrot, so I'm leaving these Trumot and Masrot on the side in my house, and those will be for, right, in parallel, or those will be the Trumot for the produce that I'm eating right now. Right, because he doesn't want to carry things with him. Or let's say he leaves money set aside for, let's say, Maser Sheni, right? All the produce that he has will now be redeemed on this coin that he has in his house. So then you can separate, assuming that it's still there, right? All of these Mishnayot are talking about, can we make an assumption that the status of something when I left it is the same status, a week later, 2 weeks later? Can we assume it's still there? So the Mishnah says, yes, you can assume that these things are still there, and you can keep eating because we assume that the things are still there. Let's say they got lost, right? Let's say you got home and the things were lost. So then you have to be concerned for the last 24 hours, but everything before that is okay. So the Gemara talks about when we have to be concerned for certain things. So the Gemara says, right, you have to check your wine 3 times a year. The wine that was, let's say, set aside as truma, because we want to make sure that it doesn't become vinegar. So you check it 3 times a year to make sure that it's still okay. The Gemara now explains when we said 24 hours, so it's 24 hours from when he checked, right? So let's say the person went on a business trip, they come home, they see, oh no, the food is gone. So now the last 24 hours doesn't count. Or maybe it's 24 hours forward from when he left, right? Let's say you left a week ago. So the first day, maybe we say, the first day it should still be there. So we assume it's there. But anything afterwards, we say, no, it was probably gone. Or maybe it never worked in the first place. Like maybe we cancel the whole thing because we don't know when the produce went missing. So since we're talking about assuming certain things are in the same condition, so now the Gemara talks about a mikvah, right? A mikvah, nowadays, we don't really have this issue. In those days, they had mikvaot that were very specific in size, and though, they had very little water or very little space. So the mikvah, let's say, could be only 40 se'ah, which is the exact amount of water that you need. So let's say last time you checked it, it had 40, and now you go and check it and it's not 40. So then we invalidate everything. And now the question is, how far do we invalidate it? Is it the last 24 hours, or do we invalidate it all the way back from when the last time you checked it? So now the Gemara talks about, again, 3 times a year. Since we mentioned 3 times a year, check the wine. So now we have other 3 times a year. 3 times a year, you can sell grain, and you can sell wine, and you can sell oil. These are the times when the prices are at peak. And therefore, even if you're in a partnership, you don't have to ask your partner if you can sell it, because we assume that it's a good time to sell the wine. And from here, the Gemara talks about the eastern wind, and it's mentioned throughout Tanakh as being very dangerous. We have it in Yonah. It makes huge waves. Some say quiet all the other waves. The Gemara talks about the 4 winds that blow every day. The northern wind balances everything. The southern is the harshest. And it talks about all the different types of wind. Okay, with that, we finish the 3rd chapter of Masechet Gittin. Let's move on to the 4th. Okay, we have the Mishnah on the top of Daf 32. Now, we still have the idea of agency. So the husband sends a get via an agent. Now the Mishnah tells us that he can cancel the shlichut, the agency, either himself or via another agent, right? Let's say he changes his mind. He can run after the agent and say, no, stop. Never mind, give it back. If the husband or another agent get to the wife first and he tells her that the get is void, so then that works, right? So let's say he sends an agent, then he runs to the wife and he said, right, he says, oh, I missed the train, so I'll take an Uber. He gets to the wife before the agent comes and he says to her, you should just know I sent a get, but I take it back and you can't have the get. Again, as I mentioned, we're again discussing, unfortunately, maybe it's, I mean, the Gemara mentions it in a few minutes, but it seems that the husband is really trying to torment his wife, which is really terrible. But it does work, and we'll discuss when it doesn't work, but here it does work. However, right, if she, right, let's say, husband, the agent takes a train, the husband takes a cab, but the agent gets there first. So then if she gets the get, the second she gets the get, she's divorced, right? As long as she gets the get before the husband gets to her house, it works. You might think that it shows that he doesn't want to give the get and therefore maybe it's not valid. The Mishnah says no. If she gets the get first, right? Again, the husband sent the get, she gets the get, it works. And now the Mishnah ends by saying that originally they allowed the husband to void the get in a court. Now, in a court means without his wife knowing, which would be extremely complicated. But Rabban Gamliel stopped this practice because, again, the agent and the wife wouldn't know anything, and then she would assume that she was divorced. And we're going to see that these are things that are going to protect the woman, right? Mipnei tikkun olam, right? We have this concept of tikkun olam to make the world a better place. Here, I think it's really to make society function better, and we'll see how it develops more in the Gemara. So the Gemara teaches that the second shaliach, let's say, again, the husband sends a get, then he's like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Let's pretend he says, I really love her, I don't want to divorce her. So he, let's say, sends a second agent. So the Gemara tells us that you might think that the second agent isn't strong enough to cancel the first agent. So the Gemara says, no, right? The second agent is strong enough to cancel the first agency. Now, we take the voiding of the get very seriously, and we don't, so the Gemara says here, we don't think that he's doing it just to torment her, because again, we're saying if he really got in the cab and drove all the way over, it must be that, maybe he wants to try couples therapy and he really loves her, and therefore it's not just playing games, it means he really doesn't want her to divorce her, and therefore we say that it's valid. If she got the get already, he cannot void it, even though, right, again, we might think that he could say, oh, as soon as I left, as soon as I sent it, I regretted it. And you might think that it retroactively basically voids the get. The Gemara says, no, I don't care what you're thinking. If she gets the get before the husband gets there, it works. Okay, now the Gemara discusses the language, right? He has to say that the get is void, meaning that he doesn't want to give it to her anymore, or I don't want it. He can't say that the get is invalid, because that's not true. The get was written in court, it's valid, you don't want to give it anymore, but if he says that it's invalid, that doesn't work. Because it's not true. So now the Gemara talks about the word batel. Batel means to void, right? So is he saying that it will be voided or that it was voided, right? Was voided, it doesn't work because that's not true. Will be void in the future is true, and therefore it does work. The Gemara lists other ways that he can void the get linguistically. You can look at Daf 32. Again, as long as he refers to it in the future tense, right? It is now voided, that works. Anything that goes back does not work. Now there's a machloket if the husband can use this get in the future, meaning he just said the get is void. Does it really invalidate the actual physical get, or can he take it and put it in his drawer and give it another time? So the question, there's a machloket back and forth if it's void or not. Right, again, because he voided the agency, right, the shlichut, but not necessarily the get itself, and therefore it seems that the get can be used again, but that is a machloket. The Gemara says that he needs to void it in front of 2 or 3 people. 3 people is a court. The Gemara seems to say 2 people can also be a court, and therefore it works, and that is how he voids the get. Daf 33, Rabban Gamliel changed it, again, as we said, because of tikkun olam, for the benefit of the society. The question is why? What did it do? Either we're concerned, right, again, the woman's going to think that she's divorced, she's going to get remarried, she's going to have children. Those children are going to be mamzerim, right? Mamzer, because she was married to another person. Or maybe we're concerned for agunot. What does this mean? That, again, if the husband keeps tormenting the wife, then the wife is basically going to say, I'm never going to accept the get because I never know if he's going to come and void it any second. And therefore, we're concerned that she won't know that she's really divorced. So now the Gemara says, let's say the husband did it anyway. He wasn't supposed to go to court and void the shlichut, the agency, but let's say he does. Rebbe says it works. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says it doesn't work. And he can't add any stipulations, meaning it's not fair. So therefore, it doesn't work. And here the Gemara says that the power of Rabban Gamliel's court is so powerful, it can even contradict a biblical mitzvah, right? A biblical thing, meaning biblically, he actually can nullify the get in court without her. But Rabban Gamliel says, no, it doesn't work, and therefore it doesn't work, which is really, really amazing. Okay. If a man told 10 people to write a get, Rebbe says that he can nullify it in front of a few of them. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says no, he has to nullify it in front of all of them. What are they actually arguing about? So they're arguing about if we're allowed to invalidate partial testimony, right? So if it's in front of 10 people, can you just cancel some of those people and then the whole thing falls apart? Or no, you need all 10 people there in order to invalidate it. Let's say he says, kulchem, right? All of you. So now that seems to imply you need all of them in order to invalidate it. Let's say he says to 2 people, give this get to my wife. So now there's a machloket if he wants to nullify it. Can he nullify it to one of them, or does he have to do it to both of them? Right? Maybe there's a difference between write it and give it, and therefore there's a distinction, right? He can nullify it by telling each one separately. They don't have to be together. And in the end, Rebbe actually concedes and he rules like Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and he upholds the court's decision, meaning that it would not be valid if he does it in court. Now we have a story of these 5 elders who were learning with Rabbi Yoshia from Usha, and he extracted a get from a man against his will. We're going to see this on later in the Masechet, if it works, if it doesn't work, but right now it seems to be working. And then he told people to quickly write it down and then to hide from the husband so that he couldn't nullify it. So again, we see that even if we might know the husband's intentions, if he agrees to it, we allow him, the agent, to give the get to the wife. The law is like Rebbe, that if it's voided, meaning if you didn't listen to the takana, so it does work and the get is void, and you can nullify the agency of some, but not in front of others, meaning just some of them. Okay, Daf 34, in the case of money, right? Let's say you have money that's divided up to the orphans. So court decisions are upheld. Again, the theme now the Gemara is discussing is, do we uphold the verdict of the courts? So the Gemara says, yes, we uphold the decision of the court. Right, in the case of the get, it can be voided, even against the decree of Rabban Gamliel. Okay, now we have a case. A man sent a get to his wife, again, with an agent. When he found her, so she was like weaving, she was busy. So she said, do me a favor, just come back tomorrow and give it to me. So she doesn't seem like she's in a big rush. When the husband heard what happened from the agent, so then he said, thank God. He says, right, Baruch HaTova Mitiv. This seems to imply that the husband was happy that he didn't give her the get. So now the question is, did he void the get? Right? If he says, great, she didn't take it, does that mean he doesn't want to give it? So they argue if the husband showed intent, enough to void it or not, right? Again, he doesn't verbally say anything, but it seems that his intention is that he doesn't want it to be given. We have another story that shows that Rav Sheshet held that a non-verbal expression of intent to void the get is enough to void the get. Or maybe it wasn't enough, and that was that story. Another story of Rav Yehuda forcing his son-in-law to give a get, and then he keeps voiding it till Rav Yehuda tells the witnesses to put in earplugs so that they don't hear the husband voiding the get. Again, none of these things would work nowadays, but it is interesting to hear these stories. Again, I really think beautifully the courts and the Gemara are trying to protect the woman, right? Obviously, this is a bad relationship, and the court sees it fit for this woman to get divorced. So the court is trying to help the divorce, get them to be divorced as much as possible. Okay. Again, we have the case with the man on the opposite side of the river. Again, we say the woman is divorced, even if he's yelling on the other side. So again, why is it brought here? Because we see the intent of the man and we don't care. If he wrote the get and he said, give it in 30 days, you give it in 30 days. Let's say a man betrothed a woman and said, give her a get if I don't marry her in 30 days. And then he's so busy preparing for the wedding, he forgot to marry her. So now, does he give her the get or not? Right? Again, they actually need to give her the get because, as we mentioned, ein ones begittin, you need to understand that there are circumstances, even if it's beyond your control, tough luck. Okay, next Mishnah. Originally, right, again, so now we have what they used to do, and then a takana for tikkun olam, to make the world a better place. So originally, they would write the name of the husband or the wife based on how they were known in that city when they wrote where they wrote the get, and the name of the city where they're from based on how it was referred to from in the city that they were in. Rabban Gamliel decreed that the get needed to have all known names of everybody involved, meaning the husband and the wife, and the name of the city and all known ways of calling the city, right? Leningrad, Stalingrad, St. Petersburg, right? Meaning all the names of the city so nobody gets confused, right? Mipnei tikkun olam, right? So if you just write Sarah Malka Bat Nanana, and really her name was Jessica, and everybody knows that, no one knows who this is, right? We have to make sure that the get has all the known names. So the Gemara explains that, right, people were known by different names, and it's so, again, fascinating that even, right, 1,500 years ago, people had different names in Eretz Yisrael and outside of Eretz Yisrael, right? How many people have an English name on their American passport and a Hebrew name on their Israeli passport? And sometimes you get in trouble because your ticket is on the wrong name, right? So it seems that this is an issue even in the time of the Gemara, and they're aware of it. So they made sure that all names were on the get, right? Rabban Gamliel said, right, you need all the names. And right, interesting, it gets even more interesting that it seems that, let's say a person had one name in Yehuda and another name in the Galil, right? So now it's two different areas. I don't know if it's an alias or it's just like a English name and Hebrew name. It's interesting. So again, you need to have both names on the get. Next Mishnah, at the bottom of 34. Originally, the widow needed to take an oath, a shbu'ah, that she didn't receive any money from her ktuva in order to get the ktuva money from the orphans. Now here, it's interesting, right? Again, I was saying how we're always trying to protect the woman. Now we have two competing values. The court wants to protect the women, but the court also wants to protect the orphans, right? We know that the orphans, we're always trying to protect orphans because they now don't have any income. So what happens when it's orphan versus widow, which is very interesting. Interestingly, it seems that orphan wins out, but we're still going to try to protect the widow. So originally, the widow needed to take an oath. Then, again, if you remember in Masechet Nedarim, those are vows, but we'll learn in Masechet Shavuot, but oaths are very, very serious. So then they prevented the widow from taking an oath. We'll see why in a minute. So then Rabban Gamliel said, he made a decree that she can take a neder, right, a vow, which is like a step down, and get her ktuva money. Again, Rabban Gamliel wants to protect the widow. He also decreed that the witnesses that sign the get, that they needed to have witnesses sign the get. Again, mipnei tikkun olam. And Hillel instituted the pruzbul, again, for tikkun olam. If you remember, pruzbul was the document that you signed before Shemitah in order to make sure that all loans do not get canceled during Shemitah. And we actually still have it today. Okay, Daf 35. A widow, just like any creditor, needs to swear in order to get money from the orphans. And again, here, the Gemara tells us a very sad story, but basically someone gave a widow money to save for him. She put it with her flour. Note, do not put any money in your flour jar because when you make bread, you forget that the money is there. And she basically baked the money into the bread. And because she's so kind, she gives the bread to poor people. And then when the guy comes to get the money, she says, I have no idea where it went. And she says, I swear, and this is where she got into trouble, right? She took an oath that may her children die if she had any benefit from this money. Again, don't ever take an oath, don't swear. But basically what happens is her child dies because she did give away the money. What benefit did she have? She saved the space that the coin was in. That was flour that she saved. the Gemara sees that as benefit, even though it was not her fault, but she did get benefit, and therefore she gets punished only because she took that vow. And this is why, right, the Gemara says, we're not going to let widows take vows anymore. But like Rabban Gamliel says, that's not fair, because now how is she ever going to get her ketubah money? So the Gemara now explains that there's a difference between an oath and a vow, and there's a difference between taking an oath in court, right? So we have nowadays in court, I swear to tell, right? You put your hands on the Bible. That comes from Judaism. They used to take a Sefer Torah, or a sacred object, and you would hold it and say, I swear to God, right, using Shem Hashem, so and so, right? So that is a biblical oath, and it's very, very serious. However, the Shmuel says you could swear outside of court, meaning without touching any sacred object. It's only derabanan, and maybe that would be okay. Rav says no, you can't even take rabbinic oaths. They're very serious. But again, the question is, what about vows? The Gemara says in the time of Rav, vows were very not taken seriously. We know, right? I promise, but really, who's telling? Are they really telling the truth? So the Gemara seems to say that in the time of Rav, people didn't take vows seriously. And then we have a few like really sad stories. One actually is a good story. A widow comes to court, and she says, give me my money. And they say, you can't because you can't swear. And then she says, I swear that I didn't get any money, meaning the court didn't impose the oath on her. She was kofetzet, right? She initiates the oath on her own. And they actually let her get the money. So again, I think it's amazing when women know the law and know that if she volunteers the oath, it does actually work. So that worked out for her. The next woman, it did not end well. Basically, she asked for money. They said, no, you can't swear. She's like, okay, fine. So at least give me my mezonot. If you remember from Masechet Ketuvot, we learned that as long as a woman doesn't get her ketubah money, she is supported by the husband, and here it's the orphans. And then, unfortunately for her, the court says to her, well, didn't you learn that if you ask for your ketubah money, you no longer get mizonot? Now, really, it's if you get your ketubah money, you don't get mizonot, not if you ask for it. And here she gets very upset because basically he messed her up from both sides, and she actually curses the rabbi, the judge, and he actually becomes ill because of this case. The question is it that he didn't do the right thing? It's not so clear. Maybe I read Rabbi Johnny Solomon wrote about this case, and he says maybe really it was that he should have davened for her, right? He couldn't do anything legally, but maybe he should have tried another way to help her. But either way, it does not end well. Okay, so again, we said that Rabban Gamliel lets her take a vow, and we want to make sure that the vow is something that's taken seriously, and therefore if she's remarried, she can take a vow, because we know that if she's remarried, her new husband can revoke her vow. Maybe then she'll lie because she doesn't really have anything to lose, because the husband can revoke the vow. So therefore we only let her do it if she's single or unmarried. And then the Gemara says, well, maybe what if she takes the vow in front of 10 people, right? Birabim, right? In public. And here the Gemara says that a vow taken in front of 10 people cannot be annulled, and therefore that would work. Or maybe she can take a vow, what's called al-da'at rabim, which means with the public in mind, right, based on their agreement, and that seems to be that cannot be annulled, and therefore that would work. That's now Daf 36. We said that there was a takana that the edim the witnesses needed to sign the document. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. It says in the Torah that it needs to be, kind of alludes in the Torah that it needs to be signed. But here the Gemara says it's according to Rabbi Elazar, who only says that what's the most important thing, the witnesses who give over the get, but not the witnesses that sign. Even according to him, there was a takana, there's a decree that the witnesses must sign the document. And from here, the Gemara describes different signing practices. So originally it seems that they signed, I am the witness, right? Like someone says, I was here, right? Without actually writing their name. But right, they could say later on, oh yeah, that's my signature. That's that's my handwriting. And that would be a way to prove that they were the witnesses. So the decree was, no. You don't write, I am the witness. You write Tamara Spitz, right? You write your name. And then I don't need you to validate your signature, right? I can have other people who know you validate the signature. And from here, very famously, the Gemara talks about different rabbis that used to sign their documents, not with their name, but with a picture. So Rav used to draw a fish, and there were different great rabbis who used different signs. And it seems that was okay because everybody knew that was their sign. But everyone else needs to sign with their names and not with this siman. And we're going to end today talking about the pruzbul that I mentioned in the before. What is the pruzbul? As we said, it's to prevent, what happened, right? People would stop lending money as it got closer to Shemitah because they were afraid that Shemitah was going to cancel their loan and then they would never get paid back. And basically, we wanted to make sure that people would lend money and that poor people, right, that basically the poor people would get the money, but the lenders would get their money back, right? So it's basically win-win. So Hillel created the pruzbul. And the question is, how does it work? And the idea is that basically you hand over all the loans to the court, and because it's a court, the loans do not get canceled by Shemitah. And the daf ends with a discussion of if Hillel made this pruzbul only for his generation because he saw what was going on, or was it for all subsequent generations? What's the practical application? If it's for subsequent generations, so that nobody can uproot or nullify this decree, because we have this idea that only a court that's greater than the court beforehand can annul something that another court did. And Hillel's court was very impressive. There is no court nowadays that could annul it. And it seems that the Gemara says that the pruzbul is good and that therefore it stays into history. And we nowadays actually do have the pruzbul in effect, which is amazing, right? How long it has been in existence. The last thing, the Gemara talks about the word pruzbul. What does it mean, right? It's a decree for the buli and the booty. For the buli and the booty, right? It's a decree to help the rich people and the poor people, right? Again, it helps the poor people because they get their loans. It helps the rich people because they get paid back. And it's win-win for everyone. Okay, wishing everyone a Chodesh Tov, a new month. As I mentioned in the email, from now on, classes will be on Wednesday. I'm trying to balance summer plans and a weekly shir. But next week, it will be on Wednesday, but it is going to be earlier in the day. It's going to be at 5. So I apologize in advance to anyone who can't make it. The week after, I don't remember. I'll let you know from week to week. I'm going to try to keep it as consistent as possible. And I thank you for all your flexibility and patience. Have a wonderful week, everyone.